The continent, the land of monsters, the land of the elves, the land of magic, and humans. Humans reached the continent and found their home on this land. They settled down, and then they began to expand. At first, it was slow and creeping, and then rapid and unstoppable. Empty, dangerous, but uninhabited lands greeted them with blood and the need to work. But humans were ready for it. They were quite prepared. Out of sweat and blood, human civilization grew, majestic, powerful. And then proud human rulers appeared, along with kingdoms of humans. This world became the world of humans. And today we will tell you how it all happened. The old Witcher is here. Before we begin, we would like to thank our first patron for the support. It feels awesome to have fans supporting us on Patreon, and it shows that we are not doing this for nothing. Keep supporting us, and we promise even more content in return. In the meantime, get yourself something nice to drink and take a snack, because we're going to continue our full history of the Witcher universe. It will be fun. The arrival of humans in different parts of the mainland. In the last video, we stopped at the moment of the arrival of humans on the continent. Ships with immigrants of the Homo sapiens race on board have docked in wild, monster-filled lands. The continent was filled with magical streams, rivers of pure chaos, and some humans were able to master them. Thus, the first wizards appeared among humanity: Ian Becker, Ivor Riche, and others. It was them who were able to protect the first weak human settlements with their magic, protect them from monsters, necrophages, vampires, and other evil beings. They helped build the first cities and erect the first fortifications. It was them who took care of the weather so that the first human harvests would not be lost. They were the key to the rapid flourishing of human civilization. They ensured that the number of humans grew exponentially, that most of the children born were saved, that there were few diseases and dangers that magic could not save from, that there was enough food and water. It only took a couple of generations for humans to reach the total population of tens or even hundreds of thousands, and all thanks to magic and its users. 3 of the most legendary human ships with white sails arrived at the mouths of the Pontar and Yaruga rivers in the central part of the continent in 764 according to the Elven chronology. Over the next decades, and until the end of the cataclysmic conjunction of the spheres, while the portals between different worlds were still open, the shores of the continent welcomed more and more humans. The ships with the immigrants docked in what would later be called Nazair and Nilfgaard. They also docked in the north, in the territories that would eventually become the kingdom of Kaver and Pavis. They even docked on the Skellige Islands, the western islands with a harsh climate. And they kept coming to the mouths of the Pontar and Yaruga rivers, replenishing the settlements of the humans there with new blood, new labor, and new bright minds. Quite quickly, the entire western coast of the continent was literally filled with settlements of humans and human tribes. The wizards helped these settlements to protect themselves and survive. And very soon, within just a couple of generations, there were so many humans that real political life finally began to bubble up on the continent. The first states and kingdoms of humans began to form around the most charismatic leaders. The first human kingdoms and rulers. Here we come to the first human states on the continent, and to the names of their legendary rulers, whose figures are forever etched in the memory of the humans of the continent. It all started with 2 names, the brothers Dezmod and Sambuk. 2 lords from among the first immigrants. They became the very humans who were able to unite everyone around them, those whom ordinary humans obeyed. The common humans still remembered those kings and longed for them. Most likely, these 2 had noble roots in the human world, for they were the captains of the 4 ships that arrived at the mouths of the Pontar and Yaruga rivers. 2 of them were captained by Dezmod, another one was captained by Sambuk, and the last one by a certain Serban, but there will be more about him later. By force and by word, Dezmod and Sambuk were the first to form states within a few decades after the landing. To the south were the possessions of Dezmod, the lands that are now adjacent to the Yaruga River, Sodden, Verdun, and Bruges. They became the cradle of human civilization on the continent. The Yaruga River was important because of its access to fresh water, and the temperate climate of these lands allowed settlements to develop especially rapidly. A few years after the presence of humans was established on the northern bank of the Yaruga, Dezmod led his people to the southern bank of the river. With the help of the wizards, the first bridges and crossings were built. There, having explored the lands near the Marnadel Valley, it was not yet called that, humans found the abandoned elven fortress of Cintra, which surprisingly was preserved in very good condition. The elves left not long ago. They moved east of the continent's shores when the conjunction of the spheres began, so as not to risk meeting many aliens. It was a real gift of destiny, a diamond around which a real big city could be built, the first great city of human civilization. And humans were quick to take advantage of this opportunity. Very soon, houses and other buildings were built around the fortress, and the fortress itself became the residence of the ruler, Dezmod. Not even just a ruler, though, but King Dezmod. It was him who discovered this city. It was him who was paid by the humans who settled on the banks of the Yaruga. So very quickly, Dezmod declared himself king. However, the word Cintra was difficult for humans to pronounce, so they simplified it, and they called their city Cintra, like the whole newly created kingdom. Thus, the first kingdom of humans appeared on the lands of the continent. This kingdom was Cintra. However, besides Dezmod, the humans had another leader. He was supported by a smaller number of followers, but he had the same royal ambitions. His name was Sambuk. Knowing that many humans had arrived on the continent north of the Yaruga, at the mouth of the second major river called Pontar, Sambuk decided not to claim the lands colonized by Dezmod. He went north instead, where he founded a settlement at the mouth of the Pontar River, appeasing the settlers there and seeking their loyalty by various means. In the northern lands, Sambuk found another abandoned elven city. It was not as beautiful as Cintra, but it was also very good for settling by humans, the lion's share of whom could still call themselves homeless. He called that city Cidaris. And following the example of Dezmod, Sambuk proclaimed himself king of the surrounding settlements. His lands were named after the capital, the word Cidaris. So in a short time after the arrival of the humans, two young states emerged on the continent. The first states, Cintra and Cidaris, with their capitals in the cities of the same name, founded on elven ruins. And then there was only more. The Great Settlement. Insatiability. Perhaps this word describes the entire human race better than any other. Humans are never satisfied with what they have. Never. If a person says that they have enough, they are probably already dead, even though they may not know it yet. It is the insatiability of humans that can explain the events that took place on the continent later, which led to countless wars of death and suffering. But first things first. Obviously, the first settlements and young states of humans were weak and not quite filled up. They should have been developed and strengthened, but instead, the young rulers thought only about grabbing more empty, unoccupied territories, and there were a lot of them. Elves lived in the east, and we will talk about their role later, but the north, south, and the entire west coast were almost empty. The number of small settlements grew by leaps and bounds, and the colonists, on the order of Sambuk and Dezmod, spread out further and further, increasing the territories of their states and the number of settlements that paid them tribute. In addition, Sambuk conquered wild tribes who had arrived on the continent before the very great landed at the mouths of the Pontar and Yaruga rivers. At the same time, Dezmod was campaigning to the south in the lands where even stranger humans lived, who did not know where they came from. Probably also arrived on some ships or via portals, but no reliable information about this has been preserved. As a result, the two states increased their nominal territories to incredible proportions, which the rulers had no way to control in the absence of large armies. At one point, the lands controlled by Sambuk stretched from Cidaris in the south, through the northern lands of Temeria in the east, and up to the Arc Coast and the Dragon Mountains in the north. The territories controlled by Dezmod were located in the south. Modern-day Vergen, Bruges, and Cintra were part of them, and most of the lands of present-day Temeria were also there. In the south, the border reached the endless steppes of Nazir. The rulers of Cintra would dream of this power for hundreds of years to come. And until the end of the Cintrian dynasty, all its rulers would bear the title not just the ruler of Cintra. Here goes the quote: "Ruler of Cintra, Prince of Bruges, Duke of Sodden, successor of Anne Skellige, Lord of Atre and Abyar." Not a bad compilation of titles, right? And most importantly, it is historically justified, for it was in Cintra that human civilization began as such. Thus, the geopolitical map of the New World was formed within a few generations after the arrival of large masses of humans on the continent. Huge, clumsy young kingdoms that did not even have large enough armies, where cities had not yet been connected by roads, where the first historical paths were just being trodden and those who would rule were being determined. They could not exist for long though. Kings Dezmod and Sambuk simply could not control all these vast territories. Therefore, the fragmentation of the young human states was only a matter of time, a very short period of time. New kingdoms. The first conflict took place in what is now called Temeria. We know nothing about it. We only know that it resulted in the formation of an autonomous formation in Western Temeria, which was nominally ruled by King Dezmod of Cintra. We can assume that it was Dezmod's war against Sambuk, and Sambuk lost it. But very soon, an incredible number of conflicts broke out. The trigger for this process was the deaths of the kings of Sambuk and Dezmod, which occurred in a very close time period. Let's divide the fates of the two kingdoms and talk about them in turn. We start with Sambuk's domain. The great kingdom of Cidaris did not last long after the death of the king. Several factors coincided at once. The first were the numerous descendants of Sambuk. All of them saw themselves as rulers of the entire state, and Sambuk gave them only a part of the territory to manage. They quarreled and fought, and when the coastal cities of Cidaris were suddenly attacked by pirates from Skellige, the kingdom was crushed in a few days. In fact, it almost did not resist the new force. At that time, the Skellige pirates were not even known of. And each of Sambuk's many sons either paid off the Skellige warriors or fought with their meager forces, lost and disappeared from the historical map of the continent. Sambuk's descendants failed to unite and resist Skellige. When the Skellige invasion ended, there was no trace of Cidaris, only a few small princedoms on the lands of modern Redania, and the city of Cidaris itself with the surrounding lands. A looted and ruined city, which would continue being rebuilt for a very long time. The names of those small states have not even survived to this day. Cidaris has fallen into ruin. Only 100 years later, a ruler named Radovid I the Great would appear on the lands of the former Great Cidaris. He would unite the lands north of the Ponta River by will and sword and create a state called Redania. Cidaris will also eventually get revived. However, it will be a small coastal vassal state. Well, while Great Cidaris was in complete decline, the possessions of Dezmod flourished under the shadow of Cintra. However, their fragmentation was also unavoidable. Dezmod, unlike Sambuk, did not have many descendants and did not give each of them a part of his possessions. He had only one son named Abdank, and a court magician, an advisor whom Dezmod trusted. In general, Dezmod was definitely smarter than Sambuk because he pursued the politics in which his state developed much faster. Cintra was becoming the pearl of the continent, while Temeria autonomy was developing in parallel, which obviously needed to be granted the status of a separate state. Dezmod did this. He did not hold on to the territories he had conquered. He tried to avoid bloodshed. That is why the humans loved him so much. And that is why he is considered the founder of two kingdoms at the same time, Cintra and Temeria. Dezmod saw his son Abdank as the ruler of Temeria. When King Dezmod died, Abdank was still very young, so for a while Temeria was ruled by Abdank's uncle, Abrad the Old Oak. Abdank's mentor and teacher was a wizard named Rafer the White. Yup, the same Rafer whose name was given to the potion in the name of the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt game. But we will get back to the story. For after Dezmod, the king of Cintra was not his blood relative, but a man from a completely different family, a certain Serbin who founded a new dynasty. The same Serbin who was in charge of one of the 4 ships of the first human settlers. It was him who created the dynasty that was destined to rule Cintra for centuries. Surprisingly, there is still no evidence of how exactly Serbin became king of Cintra. We do not know why Dezmod left his son for the throne of Temeria. We do not know whether this state of affairs was preceded by conflict, whether everything was peaceful, who was Serban to Dezmod. We simply have a fact. A certain unknown Serban suddenly became the king of Cintra and founded his dynasty in the glorious kingdom. At the same time, the lands of Nazir also gained their autonomy, becoming only a vassalage of Cintra, not part of this state. King Serban even married the daughter of the ruler of Nazir, whose name was Becca, to cement the ties between the kingdoms by a blood pact. Explanation on the map. Judging by various board games, Sapkowski's notes, and the book Saga, it went into something like this. If you're confused about what we've been telling you, don't worry. Now we will briefly show you on the map what happened and go over the historical dates. The landing of humans on the continent occurred around 764 according to the Elven calendar. It is this calendar that we will use in the future. All the events we described earlier took place over the next 60-70 years. So in the first half of the 9th century of continent, we have the following situation. In the north, it all began in Cidaris, from where King Sambuk spread his influence to the lands of Redania and all the way to Ark Coast. On the Elven ruins, he found the city of Cidaris. On other ruins, he found the city of Novigrad and many other settlements around it. But after his death, all these territories remained under the control of his many sons. At this time, Skellige formed its own separate, very aggressive state, which was very good at building ships. When Sambuk died, the pirates of Skellige attacked the fragmented Cidaris, plundered and turned many of these young settlements into ruins, and in 100 years these territories will be united under the steely hand of King Radovid I, creating the Kingdom of Redania. For now, it is a wild land of lawlessness and conflicts between several princes. On the other hand, things are much better in the south, where it all began in Cintra. King Dezmod, who also gathered many lands under his rule, acted wisely and divided the excessively large state into several parts. Therefore, when he died, this structure withstood the attacks of pirates and survived. At the historical moment where we have left off, we have a state called Temeria. Its ruler is supposed to be Dezmod's son, named Abdank. However, with Abdank still being too young, Abdank's uncle ruled Temeria. His name was Abrad the Old Oak. Abdank was taught by the famous wizard Rafer the White, who was also the chief magician of Temeria. He made sure that human settlements were not terrorized by monsters, which happened to be everywhere. He watched over the harvests and was also a real favorite of the common humans, who considered Rafer almost a messiah. At the same time, we have a state with the name Cintra and the capital in the city of the same name. After the death of Dezmod, Cintra was ruled by King Serban, who established a real royal dynasty. Further south, we have Nazir, which had gained its own subjectivity, but not to the fullest extent, being still dependent on Cintra. But it had its own king. The king of Nazir had no quarrel with Cintra, so the ruler of Cintra, Serban, married a Nazirian princess named Becca, and thus forever linked the two royal families. This is the situation we have so far. Human civilization growing by leaps and bounds, and all the other states and kingdoms of the continent that the Witcher fan knows for sure will be formed on the continent much later. We will definitely talk about this in the next videos, because something big is brewing. In parallel to all these processes, a conflict of a new order is maturing, a racial conflict, because humans have finally ran into the elves. They met them, established contacts, and went to war against them. Because, as we noted at the beginning of our video, humans never have enough. Let's look at the map again. Pay attention to the cities named Vizima and Maribor. They are on the very border of the Temeria of those times, and these were elven cities. The elves of Enshade lived there, and Abrad the Old Oak was a very ambitious ruler. He wanted more. He saw the example of Cintra and the fact that it was much easier to build a beautiful stronghold on the ruins of elven cities. Quite obvious thoughts arose in his mind. Others wanted more as well. Those we have not yet mentioned, the magic users. They realized that among the children born in the new generations, there are true sources of magic. Those children did not know what power they possessed, and they needed to be taught. An organization was needed for this, and they also needed help. The situation started to escalate from all sides. Soon everything would explode, and there would be blood, and there would be war. and magic would be put on rails. Everything will be spoken of in the next video. Meanwhile, the Old Witcher team would like to thank the audience. We tried our best to put all these fragments of information from different sources together to make the history of the Witcher's universe as structured as possible. Please like, comment, subscribe, and see you soon when the Old Witcher speaks once more.